Thank you, everyone, for joining me for these weekly studies. My name is Ariel Ben Lyman Hanavi, and this is an hour-long study on these live internet sessions that I conduct week after week via YouTube and iTunes and things like that. The first 30-minute segment is given over to a study on Matthew 9:14 through 17, are Judaism and Christianity incompatible with one another? And what we've been doing is we've been working our way through a passage that you can see on your screen right now. And I've been reading this passage from Matthew, from Mark, and from Luke, lately in Luke because of some of the extra content that shows up right near the very end. But this time I'm going to cycle back around again because we're near the end of the study. And let's jump back around again to Matthew. Let me read the passage in question first, and then I'll jump into the written study that is available on my website that I wrote. In Matthew 9, starting in verse 14, using the ESV version that you can see on your screen, which is entitled A Question About Fasting, here's what we read. Quote, verse 14, "Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, 'Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?' Verse 15, "And Jesus said to them, 'Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast.' Verse 16, "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made." Verse 17, "Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved." End quote. And so this is Yeshua answering a question that was put to him about why he and his disciples aren't fasting. And we've talked about how that there are a variety of ways to interpret this passage. One of the things that we're faced with right away when we read through the passage is we notice that, especially if you corroborate this against the other versions, like in Mark and Luke, we find that there are factual statements, right? Yeshua answers the question about something that's actually taking place about the fasting. And then he supports his answer, whatever teaching he's trying to convey. He supports it with some parables. Two parables, to be sure. One parable has to do with patching up garments, and the other parable has to do with putting new wine into old wineskins. So what we've learned is that historically, since neither of the parables are directly interpreted by Yeshua like he does in other parables, sometimes he'll say the kingdom of heaven is like thus and such, and then in parabolic fashion he'll give the parable, and then often he'll pull his disciples off to the side, and they're scratching their heads saying, "Master, what does this mean?" And he'll explain to them, okay, the parable's like this, and he'll break down all the elements. But he doesn't do that this time. So what historic Christianity has done is they have supplied what they believe are the allegorical meanings behind the parables. And this is what we have arrived at. So I'm not going to belabor the point so we can jump right into my own study. Essentially, what historic Christianity has done for the last 1900 years or so is operating under the understanding that God is doing a new thing. There's that DC Talk reference all over again, right? God is doing a new thing. God's doing a new thing with the people of God. He's taking his son Yeshua and presenting a new level and standard of righteousness, of obedience to God, of right living, etc., etc. And so in keeping with that analogy or with that theme from the largely Gentile Christian perspective, what historic Christianity has assumed is that the meanings of the parables, which are used to support Yeshua's initial answer about why me and my disciples aren't fasting, the meanings of the parables are used to support this idea that the new way of approaching God is incompatible with the old existing way of approaching God. The new system is going to replace the old system. And so we've introduced this idea of the Gentile Christian church is really here to pick up what Judaism dropped as far as the ball, right? They dropped the ball as far as serving God, displaying the kingdom of God, demonstrating God's righteousness. And they had really depreciated into this idea of legalism, of keeping the law, of upholding the law of Moses, and things like that. And so Jesus' way is incompatible with the old system. The old is really going out. It's on its way out. The new is on its way in. And once Yeshua dies and ascends back to the Father, dies, resurrects, and ascends back to the Father, basically the new covenant is upon us. So in Christian mindset, the new covenant is replacing the old covenant, which means the law of Christ is the new, and what is being replaced is the law of Moses. That's the old. The people of Israel were the people of God, but now God's bringing a new people group in with this new covenant and this new responsibilities to God. And so it amounts to what we've labeled replacement theology, even though the Christian church probably doesn't like that term and probably doesn't want to take it to its illogical extreme, replacement theology. But no matter which way you slice it and dice it, that's what it ends up with, especially if you're on the receiving end of the negative part of that replacement. If you're the old people group, if you're the Jews who are on their way out, it's bad news for you.